would be a nice, whimsical read for Christmas, I thought. This won't break my soul, I thought. The Toy Makers by Robert Dinsdale is a soft fantasy about a toy shop in London called Papa Jack's Emporium. When I say soft fantasy, I mean there are elements and toys that are clearly magical, but it's framed as just being very competent toy making as opposed to sorcery. So this shop is essentially the toy equivalent of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It is your childhood fantasies made real, but instead of sweets, it's all about toys. It mainly follows the character Kathy Ray, a teenager who has brought shame upon herself by falling pregnant at the age of 15. Her mother wants to send her to a home for moral welfare, which is one of those places where women would go to hide their pregnancy, give birth, the child would be taken from them, and then they'd be sent back to their families, absolved, and resume their previous life. To escape that fate, Kathy runs away to find work at Papa Jack's Emporium, where she meets competitive brothers Casper and Emil, the sons of Papa Jack himself. The book tells the story of these characters over the next 50 years, so whilst it starts out as a sort of nice, whimsical, fun adventure, it does derail, and with the outbreak of World War I, becomes a rather harrowing tale of free will, familial love, and escapement from reality through toys. So this book has a really interesting narrative voice, especially when it directly addresses the reader. A little bit like Jane Eyre, it only does it occasionally, usually through the phrase, consider so-and-so, consider this character, at the beginning of a chapter, as it really helps us bring us deeper into certain characters' mindsets, and it's just a fun little quirk I quite enjoyed. It might not be for everyone, but I really liked it. I thought it added to the whimsical nature and made you feel like you were part of the book, especially with the prologue, where you are led into the shop by an invisible narrator to witness the opening scene from the POV of a spectator as opposed to a reader. So I thought that was really good fun. I loved how the themes of childhood and adulthood bound together by our perception of toys was woven into the entire book, from the genre going from whimsical to war to sort of almost realism. And I thought the way those themes were explored through the characters and plot was also very clever and tight. I would say on par with like a literary novel. I also liked the way that war was written about from the perspective of those left behind, and how it explored not necessarily the horrors of war, but the effects in the UK in terms of jingoism and xenophobia. I enjoyed the characters' dynamics with each other and the way they develop over the course of the book. They all start off as teenagers, but even then you can see that the core thread of their being and how it runs through their whole lives as they grow up. You can believe that they would become the people they do, and how their mentalities grow, change and develop. The toy shop itself is very imaginative. I really like reading about all the different toys and the contraptions that the toy makers come up with. There are paper trees that burst out of tiny boxes, a Wendy house that's bigger on the inside, and patchwork cats and dogs that move around like real animals. The Emporium itself is like this wonderland. The shop floor is a maze of aisles that change every year, and there are pockets called sometimes dens that can be lost and refound years later. The shop only opens over winter, from the first frost to the first snowdrop, which really added to the whimsy, but also furthered the themes of change and that transition between childhood and adulthood. On the whole, it is written well, and the pacing is impressive considering it spans 50 years. The way time is utilised is also quite clever, being longer in the first half when the characters are young, and then as they grow, the years slip by faster and faster until 5 years can pass in just one sentence. I only had very, very tiny issues. Like there were a couple of moments where I thought the writing could have been a little bit stronger or tighter, but they were so minor I can't even remember any specific examples, and I think that might be more down to personal preference. But just there were moments I thought, oh, that sentence could have been a bit shorter. And the only other complaint I had is that it could have packed a more emotional impact. I didn't cry, which is unusual for me because I cry all the time, and this book did not make me cry. But maybe I wasn't in the right headspace for it. Overall, I think this is a really great book. It is quite emotionally taxing, but not in a bad way. More in a maybe don't read it all in one sitting like I did sort of a way. because I was wrecked afterwards. So that's all I have to say about this book. Merry Christmas. And I'll be back in the new year with another book. Yay.